Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a really complex stack of sources here, all centered around the legal and financial situation of Sean Diddy Combs. It is, to put it mildly, a lot to navigate.
It truly is. I mean, the material we have covers such a vast range of information. You've got these civil lawsuits detailing some really disturbing allegations. Then there are the federal criminal charges, the financial fallout. It's extensive.
And the mission of this deep dive for you listening is really to try and cut through that immense volume of information. We're going to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge as presented in this specific set of sources and help you understand what's really going on according to this material.
Right. Think of us as your guides specifically to this particular information set.
Our goal is to distill the facts and claims presented right here, highlight the key developments that the sources mention, outline those specific accusations detailed in the sources, look at the financial pressures mentioned, and discuss the wider industry response. And we're doing this impartially, based directly on the text provided.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To understand the current situation, I think we first need to set the stage. Who exactly is Sean Combs, and what did the sources highlight about his rise and maybe some early legal challenges?
Okay, yeah, good place to start. Well, the sources really frame him as a genuine titan of the hip-hop world.
Yeah.
He's been known by so many names over the years. Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Diddy, Puff, P.D., Love.
Right. He burst onto the scene back in the early 1990s.
Starting as a producer and record executive. And the material points out his crucial role in co-founding Bad Boy Records, which became, massively influential.
Absolutely. He was instrumental in launching and nurturing the careers of huge artists like the Notorious B.I.G., Faith Evans, Mace. He's credited in these sources as a major force in taking hip-hop from, the streets and making it part of the mainstream pop charts.
And then after Biggie's tragic death in 1997, Combs stepped even further into the spotlight as an artist himself, didn't he? With those huge hits like I'll Be Missing You and Been Around the World, he really became the face of Bad Boy and just this dominant figure in popular music.
So that establishes his prominence, which is, like you said, key context for everything that follows. Now, the sources do reference some earlier legal actions that actually predate the more recent, widely publicized events.
Okay, what did the sources mention about those earlier issues then?
Well, the material refers to a civil lawsuit filed back in May 2017. This was in Los Angeles. It was brought by a woman named Cindy Rueda, who was a former personal chef for Combs.
Ah, okay. And what were the claims made in that particular lawsuit, according to these sources?
The sources state she alleged sexual harassment and retaliation. It's noted that this case was settled for an undisclosed amount in February 2019. So while it's not the current focus, the sources present this as an instance of prior legal action he faced.
Right, okay, so that gives us the backdrop. Now let's move into what the sources detail as a major turning point and the subsequent escalation, this deluge of civil lawsuits that began to emerge more recently.
Yeah, this really seems to kick off in late 2023, according to the timeline presented in the sources we have.
Yes, specifically with the high-profile lawsuit filed by Cassandra Cassie Ventura. And the sources note her long-term, kind of on-again, off-again relationship with Combs. Her lawsuit was filed on November 16th, 2023.
And the accusations in her lawsuit were, incredibly serious and graphic. The sources specified claims including rape, sex trafficking, and physical abuse, just really heavy stuff.
Her complaint, as reported in the sources, also contained a particularly striking accusation that Combs was allegedly responsible for blowing up the car of Ventura's then-boyfriend, Kid Cudi.
Wow. And what really stood out about that specific lawsuit, as the sources widely reported, was its incredibly swift resolution. Like, Combs and Ventura reached an undisclosed settlement just the very next day, November 17th, 2023.
So fast.
Which led to the immediate dismissal of the lawsuit.
Although, a significant detail about that settlement amount did emerge later, according to the sources. In her court testimony, this was in May 2025, Cassie Ventura actually stated that the settlement she received in that case was $20 million.
$20 million. Yeah, that figure, reported from her testimony, certainly gives a sense of the financial magnitude of that initial swift resolution.
Now, deeply connected to the Cassie Ventura case is the impact of that surveillance video from a 2016 hotel incident. CNN released this footage publicly on May 17, 2024.
Right, the video. As it's described in the sources, it captured Combs physically assaulting Cassie Ventura at the Intercontinental Hotel in Century City, Los Angeles. This was back on March 5, 2016. It reportedly showed him kicking, shoving, and dragging her.
And the sources confirmed that this specific violent incident depicted in the video was explicitly included as an allegation in Ventura's civil complaint, the one that was settled back in 2023. The video also apparently shows hotel staff intervening to stop the assault.
And interestingly, the sources also reference a claim made in the September 2024 federal indictment against Combs. It alleges he actually tried to bribe the hotel staff after that 2016 incident depicted in the video.
Following the public release of this really disturbing video, Combs issued a video apology on Instagram and Facebook. This was May 19th, 2024. The sources quote him saying he took full responsibility, was truly sorry, and that his actions were inexcusable, expressing disgust with himself.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. But it's noted that this video apology has since been removed from social media platforms.
Right.
And it's also important context from the sources covering the criminal trial that prosecutors intend to introduce this video as evidence in that case. I mean, during jury selection, potential jurors were specifically questioned about whether they had seen this footage and if it would affect their impartiality.
So the Cassie Ventura lawsuit and the public emergence of that 2016 video, it really seemed to open the floodgates, didn't it? Leading to a rapid increase in further allegations and civil claims, as detailed in the sources.
Yes, the material shows a pretty clear pattern of more lawsuits being filed right after that. For example, in December 2024, a civil lawsuit emerged that accused Combs, and also Jay-Z, of raping a 13-year-old girl at an MTV Video Music Awards after party back in 2000.
Wow, Jay-Z too.
Yes, though it's important to note that this specific lawsuit against both Combs and Jay-Z was dropped in February 2025.
Yeah, dropped. But that same month, December 2024, still saw several other significant lawsuits filed against Combs. What kind of claims were made in those, according to the sources?
Well, that month, separate suits were filed making accusations from 3 men of rape and sexual assault. There was also a claim of sexual battery against a former male employee, and allegations from a woman who claimed she was drugged and sexually assaulted after being lured to a party through some kind of radio contest.
And these claims continue to emerge into 2025.
Yes, the material indicates they did. In January 2025, another lawsuit was filed by a woman who alleged sexual assault when she was just a 16-year-old babysitter back in September 2000.
The sheer volume of these claims is something several sources highlighted, right? Like Rolling Stone reported over 40 lawsuits against Combs by January 2025.
Yeah, 40. And NBC News, back on October 1st, 2024, reported that an even larger wave, potentially 120 new sexual assault allegations were actually expected to be filed.
120. That's staggering. Our sources also indicate that prosecutors in the federal criminal case added 2 new victims to the case against Sean Combs in January 2025.
And amidst this growing number of accusers and lawsuits, the sources mentioned that Sean Combs' legal team made a request in October 2024 for the identities of the accusers to be disclosed. Try and find out who was making these claims.
Okay, so that paints a picture, based on the provided material, of just a rapidly increasing number of civil claims covering a very wide and, frankly, very serious range of alleged misconduct. Now, let's shift gears to the most significant legal development detailed in these sources, the federal criminal prosecution.
Right. This is where the U.S. government becomes directly involved. The material recounts federal agents conducting these highly visible raids on multiple properties belonging to Sean Combs, specifically mentioning homes in Los Angeles and Miami. This was on March 26, 2024.
And what happened during those raids, according to the sources? What were they looking for?
Well, the material notes that electronics were seized during these operations, which suggests they were collecting potential evidence. These raids were a very clear sign the federal investigation was intensifying significantly.
Which ultimately led to his arrest.
Precisely. Sean Diddy Combs was arrested in Manhattan on September 17, 2024, following a grand jury indictment.
And his status since that arrest, according to the sources we have from May 2025.
He has remained in federal custody in Brooklyn since that September 2024 arrest, so he's been incarcerated for quite some time now.
And in the federal case, he has entered a plea of not guilty to all the charges he faces.
Yes, that's his formal position. The sources also mentioned he was denied bail multiple times, including immediately after his arrest on September 17th, 2024, and then again later on November 27, 2024.
So based on the sources, what exactly are these very serious federal criminal charges against him?
The material clearly specifies 3 main charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution.
Okay, that term racketeering conspiracy, it's something we sometimes hear in like organized crime cases.
Yeah.
What does that charge entail in this context, as alleged by the prosecution and mentioned in the sources?
Yeah, it's a serious one. In essence, a racketeering conspiracy charge under the RIQ Act, which stands for the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, alleges that an individual was part of an ongoing criminal enterprise that engaged in a pattern of illegal activities.
An enterprise.
Right. In this case, the indictment suggests the alleged enterprise involved sex trafficking and related activities as part of its pattern.
And the potential consequence if he is convicted on all these federal counts, as highlighted in the sources.
The sources note that if convicted on all counts, he could face a sentence of life in prison.
Life in prison. That brings us to the present moment, according to the timeline in these sources, where the federal trial is actively taking place.
That's right. The trial is being held at the Federal District Court in Lower Manhattan, and the presiding judge is Judge Arun Subramanian.
And there were some attempts to delay the start, weren't there?
Yes, there were. Combs' lawyers sought to delay the trial by 2 months, but that request was denied by the judge on April 18, 2025. The reason given, according to the source, was that the request was simply too close to the already scheduled trial start date.
Okay, so it went ahead. Jury selection for the trial began on May 5, 2025.
And the sources detailing the trial process mention specific questioning of potential jurors about their knowledge of the case and Combs. Critically, they were asked if they were familiar with and what their opinions were about that widely seen CNN video of the 2016 hotel incident involving Cassie Ventura.
Right, back to the video again. That really points to its expected role in the trial.
Exactly. The sources note that the prosecution intends to introduce that specific surveillance footage as evidence against Combs during the criminal trial. The focus on it during jury selection really underscores its potential significance to the government's case.
Opening arguments in the trial began on May 12, 2025.
And witness testimony commenced immediately after, also on May 12th. Cassie Ventura was the very first witness called to the stand by the prosecution.
Her testimony on May 13th, which was the first full day, was particularly detailed and disturbing, according to the NPR source covering the trial.
Yeah, she was described as the prosecution's star witness. Her testimony, as reported, accused Combs of years of physical and emotional abuse and described him exerting control over nearly every aspect of her life. A key part of her account focused on what she called his freak-offs, or FOs.
Freak-offs.
Yep.
And how did she describe these? What does that mean?
Well, she testified that much of her time with Combs was dominated by these freak-offs, which she described as drug-fueled multi-day marathons involving sex with prostitutes that she alleged he orchestrated and directed.
Multi-day marathons. Okay. Turning to the overall timeline for the trial, what is the court's current expectation for how long it might last?
According to the material, the court anticipates the full trial will run somewhere between 8 and 10 weeks, so a substantial amount of time.
And the judge recently gave a sort of target date.
Yes, on May 22, 2025, Judge Subramanian stated that the trial should wrap up by July 4th.
Okay, so we're looking at a conclusion sometime midsummer, potentially. Now, while the criminal trial is obviously the central legal battle right now, it's happening alongside that multitude of civil lawsuits we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And one lawsuit that the sources go into particular extensive detail on is the civil complaint filed by Rodney Lil Rod Jones Jr.
Ah, yes, the Lil Rod lawsuit. This one, filed back on February 26, 2024, is really notable, not just for its incredibly detailed allegations against Sean Combs himself, but also because it names this wide array of other defendants.
Who else is named in this specific lawsuit? According to the complaint summary provided in our sources, it sounds like quite a list.
It is. The complaint names individuals like Combs' son, Justin Combs, Ethiopia Heptamariam, who is the head of Motown, Lucian Charles Grange, the head of Universal Music Group, Christina Coram, and also corporate entities, including Chalice Recording Studios, Love Records, Motown Records, Universal Music Group itself, Combs Global Enterprises, and even other unnamed individuals and corporations. It alleges a really broad network of involvement.
Can you give us a little background on Rodney Jones himself, as described in his complaint? Who is he?
Sure. The complaint presents him as an American artist and music producer, originally from Chicago. He's described as something of a musical prodigy who taught himself numerous instruments and has worked with acclaimed artists. Crucially, he claims he lived with Mr. Combs for a period, which is the setting for many of the alleged events in the lawsuit.
Okay, let's dive into some of the most significant allegations detailed within this specific lawsuit, as our source material summarizes it. What does the complaint claim regarding sexual harassment and assault by Combs himself?
The lawsuit alleges that throughout the time he lived with Combs, which was from roughly October 2022 to October 2023, Jones was subjected to constant, unsolicited, and unauthorized groping and touching, specifically of his anus by Mr. Combs. This allegedly happened in various locations: Miami, New York, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Los Angeles. The complaint claims this frightened him and placed him in apprehension of harm.
And the allegations go further than that, claiming forced participation in sex acts.
Yes, the complaint alleges that throughout his time traveling with Combs across states and to the U.S. Virgin Islands, Jones was allegedly forced to solicit sex workers and then perform sex acts himself for Combs's pleasure.
Okay, there's also a specific incident involving a party in Miami in February 2023 that details allegations of drugging. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that incident, alleged to have occurred around February 4th, 2023, is detailed extensively in the complaint summary. Jones claims Combs forced him to bring prostitutes and sex workers back to his Miami home for a party. The complaint alleges this event involved female sex workers and also, disturbingly, that there were at least 5 women under the age of 16 present.
Under 16. And the drugging aspect.
The complaint alleges Mr. Combs forced all the women at the party to drink laced De Leon liquor, which was believed to be laced with ecstasy, without checking anyone's ID. Jones describes feeling lightheaded himself after drinking laced shots provided by Combs, passing out, and then waking up naked at 4 a.m. with a sex worker beside him. The complaint even apparently references screenshots of video from that night as evidence.
It also refers to a specific method of drugging being used.
It does, yeah. The complaint mentions what it calls the Combs pill mixing method, using ecstasy and other date rape drugs mixed into juices like cranberry and orange. This is based on statements attributed to someone named Mr. Deal in the lawsuit. It also cites public claims made by a former artist, Mark Curry, on YouTube, who allegedly exposed Combs spiking Moet champagne bottles in VIP sections of clubs.
One of the most graphic and detailed sections of this complaint, according to the source summary, involves a shooting incident at Chalice Recording Studios.
Right, the Chalice Studios shooting. This is described as happening on September 12, 2022, during a writer's camp at the studio in Los Angeles. It was attended by Combs, his son Justin Combs, Justin's friend who was referred to only as G, and other musicians.
What is alleged to have happened at the studio that day?
According to the complaint, there was some kind of heated conversation between Combs, Justin Combs, and this person G, which moved into a restroom right next to where Jones was sitting. Jones alleges he then heard gunshots coming from inside the restroom. He states he was in shock and feared he would be shot himself because he was so close, like just 2 feet away from G, according to the claim.
And the aftermath described in the complaint. What happened to G?
Jones claims that G came out of the restroom and collapsed, lying on the floor in a fetal position, holding his stomach and bleeding from his leg or hip area. Jones alleges he was the only person there who immediately helped G. He claimed she applied pressure to the wound, lifted him onto the toilet, asked the crowd to call an ambulance, and ultimately carried G to the ambulance when it arrived at the studio's front entrance.
And what about Combs and his son during this?
He claims that during this time, Combs and Justin Combs allegedly disappeared.
And the lawsuit alleges this incident was followed by a cover-up.
Yes, that's a key part of the claim. The complaint alleges a cover-up was orchestrated where Combs allegedly instructed his team to report to law enforcement that G was shot outside the studio, not inside. The complaint asserts it contains screenshots of the restroom aftermath showing blood on the floor, which the lawsuit argues clearly indicates G was shot inside.
The lawsuit also makes claims about the security at Chalice Studios during this event, doesn't it?
It does. It alleges security was porous and lackluster. The complaint claims that while writers and producers were checked for weapons upon entry, security neglected to search Justin Combs and Sean Combs for firearms. The lawsuit argues this was a breach of duty by various defendants, including Combs himself, Love Records, Motown Records, and Universal Music Group, a failure to protect attendees like Jones.
And the impact of this specific traumatic event on Rodney Jones, as claimed in his lawsuit.
The complaint states he was severely traumatized by witnessing the shooting and its aftermath, suffering from PTSD, severe anxiety, depression, and insomnia as a direct result. It also mentions other details, like the LAPD spending hours in the studio afterwards but making no arrests, and G's blood allegedly still being on the floor the next morning before Combs hired a cleaning crew.
The lawsuit also attempts to connect the Chalice shooting back to an even earlier infamous incident, the 1999 NYC nightclub shooting involving rapper Shine. How does the complaint link these two events?
It's quite a claim. According to the lawsuit, Jones alleges Mr. Combs had actually shared with him that he was responsible for that 1999 shooting. Jones alleges Combs told him that his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez carried the gun into the club for him and passed him the weapon during an altercation.
J-Lo carried the gun. That's what the lawsuit claims, Combs said.
That's the allegation within the lawsuit, yes. The complaint further claims Combs then forced his artist Shine to take responsibility for the shooting and used his power, money, and influence to bribe jurors and witnesses. It specifically names Natanya Rubin, a friend of one of the shooting victims, who initially identified Combs as the shooter but later changed her testimony. The lawsuit alleges Rubin later confessed that Mr. Combs paid her.
So how does Jones connect this to Chalice?
Jones's lawsuit claims that witnessing the Chalice shooting firsthand confirmed Combs's prior statements about the 1999 incident in his mind, and it reinforced his fear of Combs' alleged capacity for violence and cover-ups.
Okay, this brings us to the really significant RC Key Enterprise allegations, which seem central to Rodney Jones's lawsuit. What does the complaint allege in terms of a racketeering enterprise?
Right, the RITO claims. The lawsuit alleges the existence of an association, in fact, enterprise, essentially claiming a group of individuals and entities were working together over a long period with a common purpose. It claims this alleged enterprise has existed for at least 20 years, dating all the way back to that 1999 nightclub shooting incident.
20 years. And what was the alleged common purpose of this enterprise?
According to the complaint, the alleged purpose was for the defendants and others involved to enrich themselves, both financially and sexually, at the expense of artists, creators, and producers, primarily using fraudulent means.
How does the lawsuit claim this alleged scheme operated? What were the methods?
The complaint details several alleged methods. These include luring and deceiving artists with false promises, using various threats of violence, threats of industry isolation, threats of non-payment, and getting artists and associates to transport drugs. The complaint lists ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms, and also firearms. It also alleges forcing people to solicit minors, exotic dancers, and sex workers, and essentially using their talents and labor to produce music and goods without compensation. And legally, it claims the alleged enterprise used things like mail and interstate wires for various activities, things like disseminating funds, paying sex workers, transferring payments for drugs and guns. These are cited as predicate acts, which are the underlying crimes that can form the basis of a RICO charge. The lawsuit specifically mentions mail fraud and wire fraud.
Wow. Now, the lawsuit also makes very serious and specific allegations against the larger corporate entities and executives named as defendants, doesn't it? Particularly Universal Music Group, Motown Records, Love Records, Lucian Charles Grange, the head of UMG, and Ethiopia Haptemariam, former head of Motown.
Yes, it really does. The complaint makes a significant claim that these powerful entities and individuals aided, abetted, and profited off of Sean Combs' RICO enterprise. Jones even claims in the suit that he personally saw defendant Grange visiting Combs' homes during the period in question.
And how did they allegedly aid this enterprise, according to the lawsuit? What did they supposedly do?
The complaint claims these corporate defendants and executives took concrete steps to aid the alleged sex trafficking venture. Specifically, it alleges they provided vast sums of cash and numerous lines of credit to Combs and his entities. It claims this money sponsored what the lawsuit repeatedly calls freak-off parties, which allegedly made the whole sex trafficking operation possible. The lawsuit also alleges they concealed the delivery of millions of dollars between roughly 2000 and November 2023 and willfully failed to file required tax disclosures about the funding of these parties, allegedly to benefit from the venture. The argument presented in the complaint is that providing such large amounts of cash and sponsoring these kinds of events was far from routine business practice and absolutely should have raised numerous red flags about Combs' activities.
And the complaint claims they ignored these red flags, or worse.
That is the core of the allegation against them, that they ignored these flags, allegedly for financial gain. The lawsuit goes further and claims they had actual knowledge and constructive knowledge, meaning they either knew or reasonably should have known that Combs was engaging in sex trafficking and that they were participating in it through their funding and support. It even alleges that Grange and Haptemariam were personally present at places like Chalice recording studios and Combs' homes while he was allegedly actively engaged in the freak-off parties and sex trafficking that were, according to the suit, supported by the cash they provided. They are accused of failing to implement any enhanced monitoring at Combs' parties to detect underage girls or sex workers. Specifically, the suit claims to conceal the alleged ongoing sex trafficking.
So, according to this lawsuit, the claim isn't just about negligence or looking the other way, but alleged active participation and concealment.
That is precisely what the complaint alleges, yes. It claims they failed to report suspicious activities to law enforcement and failed to report their financial support of these parties to the government for tax purposes. The lawsuit argues their alleged obstruction, like failing tax reports, delayed law enforcement action against Combs. It also alleges that UMG entities and employees actively participated in ways that led victims to believe cooperation would be rewarded by the label.
The complaint also names specific individuals, beyond Combs, who were allegedly involved in the RICO enterprise, and describes their supposed roles, right?
Yes, it does. Based on the statements summarized in our sources from the complaint, Christina Coram allegedly directed individuals for tasks for the enterprise. Someone named Stevie J is alleged to recruit sex workers and attend or participate in freak-offs. Combs' son, Justin Combs, is alleged to solicit prostitutes, underage girls, and sex workers and would engage in freak-offs. And another individual, Brendan Paul, is allegedly described as Mr. Combs' mule, responsible for acquiring and distributing his drugs and guns.
There's also a claim in the lawsuit related to gang affiliation. What's that about?
The complaint alleges Mr. Combs funded and used his affiliation with local gangs and gang leaders who apparently frequented his homes in LA and Miami. The alleged purpose was to secure the drugs and guns he allegedly obtained and distributed as part of the enterprise.
And the lawsuit includes claims about other individuals allegedly committing assaults on Combs' premises or premises he controlled, arguing he failed to protect Jones in those instances.
That's correct. It details an alleged sexual assault by a person identified in the complaint as Jane Doe 1, who the complaint identifies as Young Miami's cousin. This allegedly happened at Combs' home in Miami on Thanksgiving 2022. Jones claims Mr. Combs was present and, as the premises owner with control over Jane Doe 1's actions, failed to step in and stop the alleged assault.
And another one involving an actor.
Yes. It also details an alleged sexual assault by the actor Cuba Gooding Jr. This allegedly took place on a yacht rented by Mr. Combs in the U.S. Virgin Islands in January 2023. Again, the lawsuit claims Mr. Combs was present and, as the renter and controller of the premises, failed in his duty to protect Jones from harm.
And just circling back to the Chalice Studio shooting for a moment, there's a separate negligence claim related specifically to that incident.
Yes, distinct from the RICO claims. The lawsuit includes a negligence claim against Love Records, Motown Records, UMG, Chalice Recording Studios, and Sean Combs himself. This claim focuses specifically on the alleged failure to provide adequate security at Chalice during that writers' camp. It pinpoints the alleged failure to search Justin Combs and Sean Combs for firearms, which the lawsuit alleges created a dangerous condition that directly led to the shooting, and Jones's resulting injuries, nervous system damage, physical harm, mental and emotional trauma.
And the TVPA claims the Trafficking Victims Protection Act claims against the UMG entities and individuals. How do those fit in?
These claims specifically allege that these corporate defendants and executives knowingly benefited financially from a sex trafficking venture. It claims they took concrete steps to aid it primarily by providing the cash and lines of credit and concealed their actions. The lawsuit claims this enabled Combs to coerce others, including minors, into commercial sex acts. It alleges they had knowledge, or at least reckless disregard, of Combs' alleged methods involving force, threats, fraud, and coercion. Essentially, it seeks to hold them liable under specific federal laws designed to combat human trafficking.
Finally, after all those incredibly detailed allegations, what kind of remedies or damages is Rodney Jones seeking in this extensive civil lawsuit, according to the complaint summary?
He is seeking a whole range of damages. This includes statutory damages set by law, common law damages based on precedent, and punitive damages meant to punish. He's also seeking pre- and post-judgment interest. Beyond money, he's asking for a declaratory judgment, which is a court declaration of the parties' rights, and injunctive and equitable relief, which could involve court orders for specific actions or to stop certain behaviors. And he's seeking an incentive or service award for bringing the case. He's essentially seeking significant financial compensation for the alleged harms, alongside court orders.
That is just an incredibly detailed, wide-ranging, and frankly quite shocking set of allegations contained within just this one civil lawsuit, particularly the claims against major corporate entities.
Yeah.
All according to the source material summarizing the complaint, of course.
It certainly paints a picture of alleged misconduct and alleged complicity across multiple individuals and powerful organizations over a significant period.
Yeah.
A lot to take in.
Yeah. Now, let's maybe pull back slightly from the specifics of the lawsuits and look at the broader financial picture and the industry fallout that the sources describe amidst all these legal challenges. What's the situation with Combs' finances based on our material?
Well, The Times of India source from December 2024 provided an estimate of Sean Combs's net worth at that time, placing it around $300 million. dollars.
Okay, $300 million. But the source noted that even though he was in jail at that point, he was not facing financial problems for now, but also stated his wealth was definitely under pressure and could decrease.
Right. His wealth, according to the material, is structured through significant assets, things like cash, investments, and valuable intellectual property.
Can you detail some of the key components of his financial status mentioned in the sources?
Yeah.
Where does that wealth come from?
A major part historically was his liquor ventures, especially his partnership with Diageo. This involved representing Ciroc Vodka, for which the source notes he was paid like an owner, and his co-ownership of De Leon Tequila. And there was a significant transaction mentioned. Diageo paid Combs $200 million for his shares in De Leon and ended their partnership earlier in 2024, before that December article came out.
$200 million just from the tequila deal.
Yeah.
He also has substantial real estate holdings that factor into his wealth, right?
Yes, the sources mention luxurious properties, specifically citing a $48.5 million mansion in Miami Beach and a $61.5 million estate in Los Angeles. It's noted that the LA estate has been listed for sale and remained unsold since September 2024, but these properties still represent very significant assets contributing to his overall net worth.
And investments beyond liquor and property.
The sources mention investments in companies like Spotify and other startups. It's also noted, however, that he sold his stake in the multimedia network Revolt, which he founded, and also shut down his online marketplace, Empower Global. So some divestment happening too.
Any other notable assets mentioned?
Yeah, the sources mention a $20 million private jet and also a $21 million painting by Kerry James Marshall that he purchased back in 2018.
Okay, so he clearly has substantial assets on paper, but the material also points to significant financial pressures building up.
That's right. The mounting legal bills from defending against numerous lawsuits and the criminal charges, along with costly lawsuit settlements, are explicitly mentioned as impacting his wealth and creating cash flow issues.
Such as the settlement with Cassie Ventura we discussed earlier.
Exactly, which the sources note ran into the tens of millions, referencing her later testimony of it being $20 million. The material also mentions him using an $18 million mortgage, apparently related to allowing his home to be used to secure a $50 million bail bond, even though bail was ultimately denied. These are significant expenditures and pressures on his finances, according to the reports.
Beyond the personal finances, the sources detail a pretty widespread industry and public fallout from all these allegations and legal troubles.
Absolutely. There have been several documentary projects focusing on the allegations, either released or announced. The sources mention titles like Diddy, The Making of a Bad Boy on Peacock, and The Fall of Diddy from Investigation Discovery. There's also a reported exclusive about 50 Cent producing a docuseries on the Diddy abuse allegations coming to Netflix.
Artist reactions have also been quite visible, haven't they?
Yeah, a prominent example cited repeatedly is the singer Keisha. She publicly altered a lyric in her big hit song TikTok, changing the line that referenced P. Diddy during performances. Ultimately, she changed it to F.P. Diddy at major events like Coachella in April 2024. The sources note her statement that she plans to perform this altered lyric permanently and encourage her fans to sing along.
Wow. The allegations appear to have impacted his music's visibility as well. Less airplay.
It seems so. Yes, the sources reported a drop in his streaming activity following the assault allegations in May 2024, and a really significant plummeting of radio airplay after the allegations and the federal raids in April 2024. It's noted that certain radio stations, including calls for bans in Australia and actions taken by stations in the U.S. after his arrest, simply stopped playing his music altogether.
And many brands and business partners have also reportedly cut ties.
That's correct. The sources list several examples. Macy's removed Sean John Products, his fashion line, from their stores and website back in November 2023. Diddy himself left his role as chairman at Revolt Media, the network he founded, that same month. Reports from December 2023 indicated he had lost as many as 18 brand partnerships by that point. Peloton, the fitness company, cut ties and banned his music from their platform in May 2024.
Even institutions and cities that had previously honored him have taken action based on the sources.
Yes, quite notably. Howard University revoked his honorary degree and terminated a $2 million gift or pledge agreement in June 2024. He returned the key to New York City at the request of Mayor Eric Adams that same month. And Miami Beach discontinued Diddy Day, also in June 2024, a real stripping away of honors.
Amidst all of this, though, The sources also mention instances of public support for him.
Yes, it's noted. Reports mention the appearance of free puff t-shirts being worn by supporters outside the trial courtroom in May 2025. The sources also mention an association with Kanye West back in February 2025, who apparently tweeted Free Puff and reportedly launched some kind of Sean John clothing collaboration around that time.
Okay, so bringing it all together now, based solely on the source material we've taken this deep dive into today.
Right.
What's the overall picture?
Well, we see a picture, painted by these sources, of a once dominant hip-hop mogul now facing extremely serious federal criminal charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation for prostitution. He's currently on trial, facing a potential life sentence if convicted.
And alongside that crucial criminal case, a really complex landscape of numerous civil lawsuits has emerged. These complaints, as detailed in the sources, lay out a wide and deeply disturbing range of allegations spanning decades: abuse, assault, rape, drugging, trafficking, and alleged cover-ups. The Rodney Jones lawsuit in particular presents these comprehensive claims extending even to major corporate entities, alleging they aided and profited from the alleged criminal enterprise.
Financially, while he still possesses significant assets according to the reports, the sources clearly indicate his wealth is under considerable pressure from those mounting legal bills and costly settlements impacting his cash flow situation.
And the repercussions have been wide-ranging across the entertainment industry and in the public sphere. We've seen documentaries, artists changing lyrics, drops in music metrics, severed business ties, and revoked public honors, all reported in the sources.
And it's crucial to reiterate for everyone listening, all of this information, every detail we've discussed today, is drawn directly and impartially from the specific set of sources provided for this deep dive. We're reporting what the material states.
We've worked through a substantial amount of material here to try and distill these key facts, timelines, and claims presented in the sources, aiming to provide you with a clear, structured overview of this very complex and, frankly, still evolving situation.
Understanding the trajectory of such a high-profile figure based on these specific claims and legal proceedings, as reported in the sources, maybe offer some insight into how serious allegations can unfold within the legal system and how they can impact personal and professional empires, all viewed through the lens of the information available in this specific material.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Given the sheer breadth and seriousness of the allegations detailed in these sources, and the multiple legal and professional consequences that have followed according to this material, what does this deep dive reveal about the power structures and accountability within the entertainment industry, both past and present, as depicted in this body of information?
Yeah, it definitely prompts reflection on the intricate ways legal processes, public reaction, and financial pressures seem to intersect when figures of significant influence face such grave claims, at least based on the narrative presented in these sources we've examined today.
A lot to think about, indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into these sources.
Our pleasure. Hopefully this synthesis provides a clear understanding of the core details presented in this complex body of information.